The envelope she carried for 15 years. The envelope shook in her hands as she stood at the edge of my porch. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but she was fighting hard to hold herself together. "My father owed you this," she said quietly, holding out a worn bundle of cash that looked like it had been saved $1 at a time, with real pain behind every bill. She'd driven across 3 states convinced she was finally closing out a debt that had haunted her family for years. She had no idea that what I was about to tell her would change everything. Before we get into it, if you believe kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can genuinely change a life, take a second to like this video. Share it with someone who needs a little hope today, drop a comment about what kindness means to you, and subscribe so you catch the next story. My name is Joshua Bennett, and I lived in a quiet corner outside Franklin, Tennessee. Life had slowed way down since I retired from running a small construction company. My mornings were simple: coffee on the porch, and a lot of time to sit with old memories. Most of them faded over the years. One never did. It belonged to a man named Nathan Carter, a carpenter whose word meant more than any contract I ever signed. Years back, when a brutal storm nearly took my company down along with several job sites, Nathan didn't leave. He put in overtime without asking for a cent more, kept the crew's spirits up when everyone else wanted to quit. We pulled through. Not long after, though, Nathan was diagnosed with a serious illness, and the medical bills piled up faster than his family could handle. I quietly gave him a substantial sum and told him to pay it back whenever life allowed. No rush, no pressure. He teared up when he took it, and promised he'd never forget. Life had other plans. Nathan died less than 2 years later, leaving behind his wife and his teenage daughter, Grace. After the funeral, the family moved away, and time did what it does. It pulled us apart. I thought about them often, hoping wherever they'd landed, they'd found some peace. 15 years passed before that knock came. Standing on my porch was a young woman holding a worn leather envelope. Her clothes were plain, her hands rough from years of work, and there was a tired kindness behind her smile. She told me her name, Grace Carter, and for a second I could barely see the scared teenager I remembered underneath the woman she'd become. She explained that after her mother passed, she found her father's old journal tucked inside a wooden chest. Between the pages was a note about the money I'd lent him and his promise to pay back every dollar. There was no legal debt anymore, nothing binding her to it. But Grace believed that honoring her father's word was the only way she knew how to honor his memory. So for 4 years, she'd worked extra shifts at a local bakery while taking night classes at community college, dropping every spare dollar into that envelope. No vacations. No new clothes. She gave up small comforts for years, all to settle a promise that was never even hers to keep. When she placed the envelope in my hands, I could see the relief flooding her face. She thought a lifelong weight was finally lifting. My chest, meanwhile, only grew heavier. I looked down at the envelope, then back up at her hopeful eyes, and thought about Nathan, his stubborn determination, the way he laughed through impossible days, all the times he quietly helped struggling co-workers and never once brought it up again. The truth was, Nathan had already paid me back, long before he died. Not in dollars, in loyalty, in friendship, in the kind of character that doesn't have a price tag. So I handed the envelope back to her. She looked confused at first, like she thought I'd counted it and come up short. I explained, as gently as I could, that her father had never actually owed me anything. That loan had been an act of friendship, not a transaction, and it had been settled years ago through everything Nathan gave the people around him when things were at their worst. There was nothing left for her to carry. Grace just stood there. The envelope slipped a little in her grip as her eyes filled with tears. For years, she'd built her whole life around a burden that didn't exist anymore. And once the financial weight was gone, what was left wasn't relief. It was grief, and something close to release. All at once. She cried, not just from sadness, but from realizing that her father's real legacy had never been a debt. It had been love. It had been the respect he'd earned from everyone who knew him. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about Nathan. I told her stories she'd never heard, How he'd once fixed a widowed neighbor's porch and refused to take a dime for it. How he quietly bought groceries for a coworker going through a rough stretch. How he showed up with hope on the days everyone else had run out of it. Grace laughed through her tears, discovering pieces of her father she never knew existed. Before she left, I asked if she'd let me help with one more thing Nathan had written about in that journal, his hope that Grace would finish college without the weight of money hanging over her. Instead of taking her savings, I told her to put every dollar toward her education instead. She hesitated, and in that moment, she looked so much like her father it nearly brought me to tears myself. Eventually, she agreed, holding the envelope close, not as payment anymore, but as the start of something new. Months later, I got an invitation to Grace's graduation. Watching her walk across that stage to collect her nursing degree, I quietly thanked Nathan in my head. His kindness had traveled a lot further than either of us could have guessed. Sometimes the biggest inheritance a person leaves behind isn't money or property. It's the good that keeps living on in the people they touched. If this one got to you, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes compassion is real. It helps us keep telling stories like this. Before I go, I'd love to hear from you. If someone showed your family kindness years ago, how would you choose to honor that today? Tell us in the comments. As Grace walked off that evening, the sun was setting over the Tennessee hills in warm, quiet color, and it hit me all at once. Debts can be settled with money, but love only gets repaid by passing it on. Nathan's promise was never really about the dollars. It was about who he was. And through his daughter, that legacy is still moving forward, still touching lives, long after he's gone.